Hey, Paul, are you in here?
On the other side of the cans.
That is a lot of soda, my friend.
I'm trying to get ahead on episodes of my show. Who's got time to eat?
Why don't you try Huel Black Edition?
What's Huel Black Edition?
It's a nutritionally complete vegan shake with 40 grams of protein and 27 vitamins and minerals in each 2-scoop serving.
A whole meal in one shake?
Yeah, man. Each 2-scoop serving of Huel has 400 calories and includes vitamin C, calcium, omega-3, vitamin B12, zinc, fiber, and more. Just mix it with water and you're giving your body everything it needs without having to think about it. It's also gluten and lactose free. Shake it up in 30 seconds and you're back to your day.
That sounds appealing, but what's it taste like? I've tried meal replacement shakes in the past and they taste like a retirement home.
I can actually speak to this one personally. Huel Black Edition is a meal replacement shake you'll actually want to eat. They sent us samples of 2 of their 9 flavors, cookies and cream and salted caramel, and I went through both bags. It's quite literally the first time I've enjoyed a vegan protein shake.
All right, I'm sold. How do I get some?
Go to huel.com/GSG to place your order. That's HULE.com/GSG, and first-time customers get a free t-shirt and shaker.
Huel.com/GSG. Done.
Now, can we do something about these cans?
I wouldn't. I'm pretty sure something's living in there.
Get out.
Hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys.
Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
And this is the show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 153, and we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Happy New Year, Paul.
Happy New Year, sir.
It has been a good one so far for you?
Yes, so far, I suppose.
That was very non-committal.
What are we? It's only 5 days in. So far, so good.
Fair.
I've had a very gentle lead into the year as I'm still on holiday. So I've confused all my co-workers by only returning for a Friday, which nobody understands, but I do.
Sometimes you just got to do things to baffle people. In fact, I did this myself because obviously Nick came to visit me in Montreal for Christmas. She was supposed to be here for 2 weeks, but because of the massive storm we had on the West Coast, she was stuck. She was supposed to be here on the 23rd and instead got here on late on the 25th. So a little less than 2 weeks is what she ended up staying for. But the day she was supposed to arrive, the 23rd, I had booked a hotel just down the road from my apartment so we could have a place, where she could just kind of relax. Because obviously I share my apartment with 2 other people. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice after a day of travel, you can actually have a shower where, some Ukrainian kid is not banging on the door asking questions about the ventilation. And when I found out her flight was going to be delayed, it was too late to cancel the hotel. So what I did is I thought, well, okay, I may as well just go. I'm paying for it. And I mentioned to I have a couple friends here and I said, hey, got the hotel room. Let's get some booze. Let's party. I don't know. Well, it's a free hotel. It's not free, but it's a hotel. I feel like we should do something with it. And then we were hit here in Montreal by a crazy winter storm that day. And traveling was basically not recommended. It was a kind of wind that just rips the breath from your mouth, Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, I'm still going to check in. I'm still checking in. I have to pay for this goddamn place regardless. So I am going there. So I walked into this hotel, no bags, checked in, went upstairs, ordered a pizza. I watched Black Adam and the full moon film Shrunken Heads, which I don't know if you've ever seen. It's absolutely bizarre. And then I thought the bed sucks. So I'm just going back to my house. I'm just going back to my apartment. I can see it from here. This is stupid. So I just left. I left the TV on, left the lights on, walked out. And I like to think I've left them with their own little ghost story because a man came from nowhere carrying nothing, checked into the hotel room, and then that same night again, walked back out into the storm, never to return, leaving everything on. And so if I'm lucky, this will be a tale they tell from here on out. The very lame ghost.
Season 17 of Unsolved Mysteries.
I was thinking more of a Ghost Adventures episode, but yeah, no, that works too. But it is a new year, and that means new Ghost Story Guys. We have a whole year worth of stuff lined up. I mean, we don't have all of it planned out yet, but we have a lot of it planned out. And we're really looking forward to this. Now, this brand new year. This will be our 3rd year working together, which I'm very excited about. And we are going to start off with a wonderful collection of listener stories that explore some of the darker corners. We've got stories of places that seem to exist one night and be gone the next. We've got stories of strange things in the sky, strange things on the road. We're starting 2023 off with a great reminder that the world is just as fucking weird now as it ever has been. And speaking of fucking weird, I have to mention this. I wasn't sure if I would, but it's public knowledge now, so we can talk about it a little bit. Obviously, our composer, Jerry, who we've been working with since the summer, him and his family have been struggling. You know, I think I ended up cutting it from the show, but they were in a car accident. They were having some financial hardship, and Jerry's been very public about this, so I feel comfortable. I feel comfortable saying this, but he had originally started a GoFundMe because they had just been through it. And, you know, the family were, because of a crooked landlord, they were living in a hotel, and it was just a whole thing.
Yeah.
And he'd started a GoFundMe just to try and get them out of this hole. And Jerry's a hardworking guy. He's a proud person, you know, and this was not something that they wanted to do. And then through some Christmas miracle, and literally no one that I'm aware of seems to understand how, and I was, you know, Jerry and I have briefly spoken about it. The actor and pro wrestler Dwayne Johnson heard about this. Somehow this came to his awareness. And to say that he made Christmas happen for them would be putting it mildly. And obviously the specifics of it are between him and Jerry, but it was really wonderful, man. I mean, talk about a Christmas miracle. I've never felt one way or the other about the guy because, you know, to me, people like that are just sort of as distant as the Greek gods. But Dwayne came through, and he came through hard. And again, it's just one of those things where you never know who's out there, and you never know who's listening, and you never know whose eyes are on the things you do. And that's just a great example of something that really worked out the way that you always hope it would.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, I'm the same. I'll never hear a bad word ever spoken about Ryan Reynolds because I saw a video he did as Deadpool for a friend's terminally ill son who sent me the video, and it reduced me to tears. It was absolutely incredible.
Oh, wow.
He did a live video call with him.
Oh, Jesus. Well, yeah, that has also changed my opinion of him.
And took him around the set, and he was like, look, this is what we're doing, and just really talking to him. It was amazing. So Ryan Reynolds will always have a very special place in my heart, because for him to do that in his position, he doesn't need to do that. I know he likes to play the fool a lot, but yeah, he's clearly got a heart of gold, that lad.
Damn. All right. Well, we're starting the year off on a positive note then, and that feels good.
Share the love.
Absolutely. Share the love. I'd say that's what we're all about, but I don't think my wife would approve. Speaking of my wife, and then I swear to God, folks, we're going to get to the patron shoutouts, and then yeah, well, she thankfully she doesn't listen to the show.
Hey, we've got something in common.
Yeah, I think the general attitude is I hear you enough. Why in God's name would I hear you more? And that's fair.
Yeah. I often get to the last thing I want to hear you talk about, Paul, is Bigfoot. Okay?
So yeah, but the last thing I'll say before we do the patron shoutouts is I want to say hi to Bailey, because I was just speaking to Nick today, and she had to go for an appointment, and where she had to go, she had to wear a mask, and she just grabbed on the way out the door my Ghost Story Guys mask. And when she got to the office, the young woman at reception said, "Oh, I love Ghost Story Guys." And Nick mentioned that she happened to be my wife, and she went, "Holy shit." And so that was Bailey. So I said we'd say hi to her on the show. So hi, Bailey. Well, I can't think of a good segue, Paul, so we're just going to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, you are the New Year's to our Christmas, which is to say, without both of us, this holiday would not be complete. We'll go with that. And
God damn it.
That's right. It would be incomplete. Christmas without New Year's wouldn't make sense.
No.
And of course, we'd like to thank all our patrons, but today we'd especially like to thank our latest patrons, and they are
Amon Mazingo.
Hey, it's Amon from Afro Tales, which I like to think is part of the Ghost Story Guys family.
Hello.
Matt Bellamere.
Curtis and Amanda,
Brandon,
Zach W.,
Eli Raindancer,
Michael Todd,
Crazy Mom,
Mose.
Guys, thank you so much for supporting the show. Again, I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Everyone who listens to the Ghost Story Guys, you help make the show what it is, but without our patrons, the show doesn't go. And if you'd like to join their ranks, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. Listen to the end of the show to find out about all the cool shit you get, but we will say, for $1 a month, you get an ad-free feed. Who doesn't love that? Ads suck. Again, for more details, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. All right, as I said before, shout out to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is the project of film journalist and composer Jerry Smith. Jerry's always taking commissions, and you can find them at rainydaysforghosts@gmail.com. You can also find all their music as Rainy Days for Ghosts on streaming platforms everywhere. Now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. As we said before the break, on this episode, we're going to be sharing some listener stories of really, truly unusual happenings. I mean, obviously, unusual happenings is what we do here, Paul, but these are particularly unusual. And at least two of them are from a listener who is a truck driver. And I love stories from the road. The stories from Death on the Road are probably some of my favorite. So I'm looking forward to getting to those. But of course, before we do, got to read some email.
Our courteous and efficient staff is on call 24 hours a day to serve all your supernatural elimination needs.
We're ready to believe you.
All right, so our first email comes from Jason, and this just came in. So I figure I'll just put this. It's not in the script, but I'll just insert this here. Jason says, "What's the C segment? You sometimes mention it, and you say it's at the end of the episodes. In my head, when I divide the show and when I do the script for me and Paul, the A segment is the part where Paul and I talk about what's new and going on with us. And then the B segment is this part. The B segment is the parts with the stories. And then the C segment is the stuff that's like the outro stuff. So it's thanking everyone, Ghost Force when we do that, talking about patrons, or talking about Patreon and all that stuff. That's the C segment. So it's the show is kind of divided up in my head. And I've been doing it that way for years now. I actually heard it from another podcast, and I liked sort of the simplicity of it. So I've been structuring the show that way ever since. So yeah, that's what the C segment is, Jason.
When you've listened to enough episodes, you can unlock the D segment.
No, the judge says I'm not allowed to give anyone the D segment. My wife too, actually.
New year, same smut.
What the hell? It's a winning formula. Why fuck with it?
Our next email is from Kerry, and Kerry says, "I love when you guys get talking about music from the 80s and 90s. I was born in 1978 because it makes me feel not so old." Oh, I don't know. Should we be insulted there? I'm not sure. Anyway, I am coming close to being up to date on your backlogged episodes so that I will only be listening to new episodes as they come out. I will then start on Mysteries and Monsters. What are other paranormal podcasts that you deem would be worth my time? I would like suggestions for podcasts that are still running, ones that don't buy into the Zach Baggins approach, and ones that have something of relatable connection to their listeners.
I mean, off the top of my head, I would say anything Kev Eustace does. Dark Paranormal, and we need to talk about ghosts. Kev is he's great he's a great storyteller. Wintag is a lot of fun. Dark Paranormal is a very different vibe, but it's still very good. And Kev's really good about keeping in touch with his listener base. So I would say those are two great places to start. I think who else does? I'm really coming to enjoy, as I've mentioned before, Joe Hickey Hall's, what's it called again, Paul? I can't remember. The name is escaping me.
The Modern Fairy Sighting Podcast.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. I've really come to enjoy that. Her most recent episode with Brett Manning was a really good listen. And she's going to be on your show soon.
She is. Yes. Should be out at the end of this month.
Fabulous. And, you listen to a lot more paranormal shows than I do. Who else do you recommend?
Unexplained with Richard McLean Smith. Fabulous. Sometimes he'll talk about some cases that are very well known, and sometimes he'll talk about things that you will probably have never heard of, especially if you don't live in the UK. So I would recommend it. And he does such a bloody good show, and he's a really nice guy. because I met him before I launched Mysteries and Monsters, and it was one of the kicks up the bum I needed to make me think, hey, this looks good. So I would definitely recommend that one always, because he does some brilliant stuff, and it's nice and short segments. He does like between 30 to 45 minutes a week, and he does seasons. So I think he's just finished season 6.
Another one that I was a guest on a couple of years ago now was Haunted AF, and those gals were a lot of fun. I really enjoyed being on their show. And Adam from Weekly Creep and I have become Instagram buddies. Be worth a look.
I'd say anything Danny Robbins does as well.
Sure. Oh, yeah,
He
yeah.
did the Battersea Poltergeist. His latest one's called The Witch Farm. He's done another series called Uncanny. If you can cope with skeptical explanations, which are usually stranger than the actual events they're trying to explain away, then they're usually pretty good. Campfire, Jim Harold has some really good first-hand stories from listeners, and Jim's always really good with them. Teases out some extra little details when you have a nice chat with them. I'd say those are good. I suppose it depends if you want to in-depth, kind of thoughtful podcast. Supernatural Circumstances, Mike Brown and Morgan Knudsen.
Oh, sure, yeah, of course.
Their show's very good. They've had some brilliant guests on in the past.
No, I haven't been on there. Paul's episode of Supernatural Circumstances is very good.
Yes, it's always nice to realize just how much I know about that particular case.
It's very impressive. Does Morbid ever do paranormal shit?
Yeah, Morbid do. I was going to say that the ladies from Morbid do, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 a month paranormal shows in between all the murderers and awful cases and crimes that they cover. Especially during Halloween, they do some really good ones. I think they've just done one about a school, haunted schools. So they do at least one a month. They do love the spooky on that particular channel as well, and Morbid's really good anyway. There
you go. So that should get you started. Those are all of those shows have pretty substantial back catalogs. So, Kerry, that should keep you going. All right, next up is Amber. Amber says, "I hope this email finds you well." It does. Thank you. Longtime fan of the show and a huge supporter of the hilarious Instagram posts. Thank you very much. I am located in your spirit animal state of Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia to be precise. Everyone in Philly is angry all the time, but the food is delicious. I have not been back to Philly.
It's an NFL thing. The team I support are in the same division. So
gotcha. I understand.
Sorry. Only joking. Who doesn't love a Philly cheesesteak?
That's true. Although I've yet to have a proper Philly cheesesteak. Apparently a proper Philly cheesesteak is actually a very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a high class food is what I'm saying. Spray cheese and chipped beef. And I had one when I was in Philly, but it was in a, not a fancy restaurant, but it was a little more of a hipster place. So I want to have one now that I can have a little bit of cheese. I want spray cheese. I want all the spray cheese and I want it now. So Philadelphia, I'm coming your way.
To clog my vein.
Exactly. So Amber goes on to say, "I wanted to reach out and send you a new piece of music to check out. It is a song called Brandywine by a band called Western Slang. I know about your strange connection with Brandywine Valley and thought it may pique your interest. It is loosely inspired by a missing persons case in the area." Interesting. Well, thank you very much, Amber. I'm going to check that out. I have not listened to it yet.
Our next missive is from Jamie, who says, "Just wanted to send a note saying thanks for all you do. I'm a long-time fan of Ghost podcasts, and I want to tell you how much I appreciate yours. It really is one of the best out there. I was recently listening to an older episode, and you mentioned taking a road trip through Minnesota. I'm originally from there, and imagine my surprise when you mentioned the town I lived near. Now this is deep cuts. I wanted to confirm something you mentioned on the show. You said that a certain old building there gave you the creeps big time. I immediately knew exactly the building you were referring to. When I was going to school there in the late 80s, early 90s, this building, now a community centre I believe, was a school called Hankey Elementary. As a kid it freaked me out and also fascinated me, and I didn't know exactly why. I just knew it gave me the creeps in the exact same way you mentioned. Anyway, it was so random you mentioning that, and I just wanted to confirm your feeling about the old Hankey building. Lastly, I thought of you guys because Mr. Skin emailed me this morning. Please see the attached image. Why? I did not contact him, As far as spam goes, this is the most terrifying I've seen. I don't need this. And I had to say, when I saw that, I just chuckled for ages.
Yes. Yeah, Jamie included a screen grab. And for those of you who don't know, of course, we did an episode called The Abominable Mr. Skin, which was a terrifying listener story. And on the cover art, I have The Abominable Mr. Skin, not that one, in brackets. And that is because Mr. Skin is also a porn site. And so, yeah, it's my friend told me. Mm-hmm. My friend Paul.
You told me.
Paul told me that. Yeah, no, that's fair. You are not the only one burdened by knowledge. But yes, so that is the gag there. So thank you, Jamie. And yeah, we will continue pretending that you don't know why customer service for Mr. Skin emailed you. Wink.
Maybe it's a tulpa.
That raises all kinds of questions that I don't really want to tangle with right now.
Have any other listeners had emails from strange creatures? Have you had a letter from Bigfoot or a postcard from the Mothman? Let us know.
See, I thought you meant a tulpa of Jamie signed up for a porn site.
What?
I don't know.
Did you go there?
Because you mentioned tulpa. I was reminded years ago, I was at a sort of a slam poetry / stand-up night, and this guy, this reedy little nerd, went up there, and he started doing this bit. I don't know if it was meant to be funny or what. It wasn't. But it was a bit about him and a tulpa in the form of this one particular porn star and all the things that they would do. And it ended with him being run over by a bus full of copyright lawyers, which apparently he thought was hilarious. But that, for some reason, when you said tulpa, and because this was the topic, it brought me back to that particularly scarring evening in the bar. And that's, I think, where that came from. So I'm sorry, Jamie. I'm not sorry, Paul. You know what you signed on for. All right. So this next one comes from Kai. Kai says, I wrote you guys a while back, but I wanted to write again to let you know that I really appreciate you both so much. Thank you for the laughter and for always letting people know it'll always be okay and get better. I wanted to tell you this for a while because of the messages you guys have about how mental health can take a toll on your actual body. I've always struggled with mental health problems like anxiety and depression and a lot of trauma. I never thought it was truly running my life or thinking it was as bad as it was until one day I was working and my legs just gave out. They told me it was my trauma and anxiety. They called it conversion disorder. It's basically where your brain goes into survival mode and is constantly working too hard, so it shuts down something it thinks it doesn't need to make room. For some people, it's an arm. For some, their stomachs don't digest as well as they should. For me, it was my legs. It's been 4 years since the day it first started. I lost my job and still can't completely walk. But I wanted to tell you guys this because maybe you both will understand and tell other people that they need to take care of themselves. Mental health is so important, and if you even wonder for a second about if you need therapy, do it. It's only going to help. Kai finishes by saying, thank you both for sharing your love of mysteries and monsters and ghosts. You both hold a special place in my heart. And Kai, thank you so much. And we're sorry you're going through that shit. That sucks. But I think it's a really important thing to mention. You know, I think we sort of forget that these things can have real direct impacts on our physical health outside of, you know, the mental toll. And for anyone who's sort of doubting that, there's a really great book that a friend of mine recommended called When the Body Says No. And I think it's by Gabor, who has written a number of books. He's Vancouver-based. I want to say he's a therapist, but he works with people who struggle with addictions. And I read his book. Oh shit! Again, the name is escaping me. But I read one of his. I've read a couple of his books now, and very, very, very intelligent guy. And When the Body Says No, for anyone who's struggling with this kind of stuff, very much worth your time, and to understand the relationship between mental trauma and very real physical conditions.
Especially much so at this time of year as well, because a lot of people have some mental health hangovers due to this period, either through having to deal with family members they don't really wish to spend time with, or maybe that they don't have people to spend time with, or maybe this period of the year makes some people feel very sad. And that's tough. And January is always a hard month, regardless. Doesn't matter how good you are. I hate January. I used to hate it a lot more. I used to really struggle through January before I sort of took my fight to myself, as it were. I used to absolutely, if I could have slept for 31 days in January, I would have.
Really?
Yeah. Awful. It's one of those things why I always take a few days off after the new year just to ease myself into it.
Right. Yeah, fair enough.
Self-care.
Yeah, man, that's it. It's self-care is important. Self-care is not just a meme. It is a thing you actually got to do.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kai, and we hope that your recovery continues. And thank you for listening to the show. And again, that book was When the Body Says No: The Cost of Hidden Stress by Gabor. It's worth a look.
Our next email is from Alison. I was listening to your Terror in the Skies episode, and it reminded me of a little thing that happened when I was a kid. When I was 5 or 6, on a very clear night, my dad took me out to the backyard to see if we could see any constellations. While we were looking up, he pointed out a little green light that was cruising through the sky. We both assumed that it was a plane or something, but then it quickly zipped backwards at an angle, then shot off in the same direction it had been moving originally, making a kind of Z shape and disappearing. I asked my dad what it was, and he said, let's go back in the house. I think his response freaked me out more.
Thank you, Allison. Allison's a longtime listener of the show. And yeah, it's always funny when stuff like that happens and you realize that, maybe my parents don't know as much as I think they do. And I think this has bothered them even more than it's bothered me.
Yeah, it's cool though, that. That's a great sign. Always remember, meteors don't go up.
Our last email is from Chris. Chris says, I absolutely love your podcast and the dynamic between the two of you is wonderful. I find myself re-listening to episodes multiple times and simply cannot get enough. Well, thank you, Chris. After listening to your most recent episodes on dreams, I was very moved by both you and Paul discussing your relationships with family and friends. When Paul said that you can pick your friends but not your family, and you should not have to put up with it, well, to say that really hit me would be an understatement. I ended a 7-year relationship with my fiancé earlier this year, and to say I've been feeling untethered is putting it mildly. I distanced myself from my friends in favor of him and his friends, and to make things even more difficult, I cannot bring myself to lean on my family for support for a variety of reasons, many emotional/psychological. I should say that I'm also in therapy, so I do have support and an outlet for the complicated emotions and brain shit surrounding my situation. I just wanted to tell you both how much I resonated with hearing from you that friendships are just as important, if not more so, than familial ones. As I forge ahead with my life outside of a romantic relationship, hearing supportive words like that means so much. I've reconnected with some friends who I let drift away, and I'm beyond thankful that they have welcomed me back into their lives. It should be said that making friends again in your 30s can be difficult as fuck, but I'm still doing it, because as you also say, there are people out there who love me and will help me find my way back to the world. Please keep on writing and recording. You're both giving back to your audience more than can be expressed in words. I hope one day to have a ghost story of my own to share, or if I find myself in Canada or the UK, to share a coffee or a pint with you. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year to both you and your respective partners. Oh, Chris, thank you very, very much.
I was going to say we can have a coffee and a pint. I'm not fussy.
That's it.
Not at the same time.
No, that's weird. But yeah, successively. Nah, Chris, I'm sorry to hear about the relationship, but I'm glad you're finding your people again. I know that can be a hard thing to do after being away for a while, but good friends understand. Good friends take you back.
Yep, absolutely. And it's heartwarming and humbling to get messages like that. It means a lot. So thank you very much.
All right, so that's email. And you know what that means. That means it's time for the stories. The Helicopters, from Martin. As a young teen, I used to go on week-long hunting trips with my dad and friends of ours from a ranch down the road. One night, while talking about the good old days, the oldest hand at the cooking fire, born around 1900 or so, recounted a tale of how government boys were always bothering hard-working ranchers with new rules or their fancy-ass machines. Being a secret Fortean even back in the 70s, my ears perked up and I quickly got in a, "Tell me more about the machines," and was rewarded with a story of herding cattle on the Fraser River 50 miles out from Clinton when a damned big silver helicopter came hovering along the river, scaring everything. He goes on to say, "Never seen one before, must have been the summer of 28 or 32, but way before the war." I didn't pursue it further, but I never forgot that short mention. For those of you not air nerdy, the first real helicopter flight was in 1939 and was far from big or silver. Skeptics like to make a big deal about faulty memories, but they never bother to ask about memories the teller doesn't even realize are important. This old rancher had no idea he had seen anything odd, because he clearly had no idea helicopters did not go that far back. Also, for the wise asses in the audience, it could not have been an autogyro in the interior of BC in 1928 either. And we have I have two little bonus stories from our listeners that I thought I'd throw in here before Paul and I talk about it. The first is from Autumn, and Autumn says, I just listened to Terror in the Skies, and Uncle Bren, okay, I'll take it, sure, thank you, that's lovely. Uncle Bren said he would like to hear if we ever experienced phantom planes. For me, it was a phantom helicopter. I was 9 years old and playing outside when I looked up for no reason in particular and saw a helicopter maybe a few hundred feet in the air. But what was weird is that it was on fire and also completely silent. I kept watching for a little bit, and the helicopter took a dive almost and started falling from the sky. I was terrified. I watched it fall and ran to tell my parents, who either didn't believe me or didn't care. I went back outside and saw no smoke and heard nothing. It was bizarre and terrifying, but nothing ever came from the incident, as far as I know. And this is a second bonus from Wacky Weesus. And they say, about Tuesday's Terror in the Sky episodes, is a little bit older. You mentioned a story from a listener who experienced seeing a, quote, helicopter that was flying without making any sound and not actually moving, more like a glitch in the Matrix. I have seen a few of those throughout various parts of the Sonoran Desert and Coconino Forest. So that's interesting, Paul, especially the idea of a helicopter before there could have been helicopters.
Well, it's one of those things that a lot of people don't really focus on, strange things in the skies prior to World War II. And they're shitloads.
Sort of the Foo Fighters and things like this.
Well, yeah, plus you've got the mystery airship flaps.
Of course, yeah.
Which kicked off in mid-1870s in the States, but they happened here in the UK, they happened in Europe, they happened in Australia.
I seem to recall, I think it was Micah years ago was trying to debunk those, but I can't remember enough about it to make a case for it one way or the other. I seem to recall him saying that, I can't remember the specifics of it, but he was claiming that they either hadn't happened or, again, it's so long ago, and I haven't listened to Micah's show in a long, long time. I
mean, some of them were obviously just filler, but I find it hard to believe that newspapers in the UK, in Europe and Australia saw some stories from 20 years previously in Arkansas and thought, oh, that's a jolly good wheeze. Let's print this. This will keep the public on their toes. So often it's very easy to, especially in those days when people talk about old newspaper reports in the States, that a lot of them were just made up. But were they? Were they really? Are we not just sort of dismissing things just because it's ye olde newspapers and that kind of, we look back with retrospective eyes and presume that everything was rubbish, when we're clearly not everything that was printed in the newspapers in those days was rubbish. They were printing news. So why is this particular one, just because it doesn't match what we're aware of? Because it only takes one of them to be true for it to be a real thing.
Yep. And I got to say, this is one of the reasons why I have never liked satirical news, but when things like The Onion were first coming up, and in Canada, we've got one called I think The Beaver or Beaverton. I think that's what it is. But I remember 12 years ago on Facebook, I said something to the effect of, boy, I think before we come up with any more of these satirical news sites, we got to help some folks get a handle on what satire is, because people have a hard time, if you have one news story that is false, that you just cook up because you want to get clicks or something, that casts doubt on everything else you do. And I know definitely there have been occasions, in mainstream media where they've just maybe not made shit up, but they've played it up for clicks or for shares. And I think that hurts the credibility of media in general, because then people will just say, oh, something comes up. Oh, well, that's what they want us to believe. Well, okay. And it just harms the public trust, because there's no baseline. And that's, I think, how we end up with shit like QAnon.
Yes, true. But they also do publish stories where they interview a woman who claims to have married a pirate ghost.
Well, that was true. That's fine. That's
Of course it is. Of course it is.
No, that's what I mean. If you put shit like that out there, it lowers the standard for everything, because it's like, oh, it's another fucking pirate ghost. I've said it before. I said it in the wrap up for Strange 2. The fact that the U.S. government has admitted what it has about UFO sightings in any other era would be front page news. It would be a massive sustained story that forces us to re-examine the world. Because sure, they'll say, a large portion of these are explainable, but there is a significant portion which is unexplainable by current means. And by current means, like current models of how physics work, for fuck's sakes. That's massive. That's not woo-woo bullshit. But because, there's a lot of other things, a lot of other mitigating factors too, but I think because people have lost essential trust in the media, they just kind of hand wave it away. Bias in media is a terrible fucking thing. And I say that for both sides of the aisle. I think, I was listening to a book, I won't say which, because I think it could be a polarizing topic, but they were talking about, the implicit bias in both left and right wing media and how it just skews the entire playing field because it's hard to get a real sense of what's happening.
Very much so. Very much so. Especially as someone as a student of politics.
That's it.
Frustrating.
Since we're talking about UFOs, I watched the new Missing 411 documentary last night, Missing 411, The UFO Connection. And oof, Paul, oof. That film puts 2 bullets in the head of whatever credibility that gentleman had remaining. I still believe there is something to the Missing 411 phenomenon. I know a lot of folks don't, but I've read enough of let's put it this way, folks. I've read more than you have. I'll just say that. I've read more than you have. There is more there than you can explain away, by the things I've heard. But this documentary does not help, because to say he's just drawing connections between random things would be generous. It's about these hunters who disappeared, and he really nails down the fact that they're of Germanic origin, and it's all in this one area. Well, maybe that area was settled by Germanic people, so there's majority Germanic people there, man. Like, that doesn't mean that the aliens are after Germans. He's drawing conclusions really where there are none.
If they are after Germans, I know an easier way to get some. It's made me chuckle because I saw something featuring David Huggins over the Christmas holidays.
Who's David Huggins?
Who's David Huggins?
Oh, he's the alien fucking guy, right? The one they made that documentary about. Right. Love and Saucers.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it was from 1998 because somebody bought me the 40-inch TV. In fact, my mum bought me the 40-inch TV.
Oh, yeah.
Re-release that they've done. And it was on, he's one of them people I just forget about it. And then I see it and I'm like, oh my God. Pictures of having sex with aliens with big eyes.
That guy must have loved Avatar.
Well, or did James Cameron love David Huggins?
Let's hope we never know.
Yeah, but I forgot he was a Wall Street broker, wasn't he?
I didn't know that. I the only thing I know about Huggins, aside from the alien fucking thing, is that they made that documentary about him.
Yeah, this item was from 1997, so he's been around a long time.
Oh, man.
It's like the whole secret space soldier story that's going on at the minute that's hit the news.
Oh, really? Is that a thing again?
Yeah, one's being sued for libel and has admitted that none of it's true. He's made it all up.
I'm shocked.
I'm stunned.
Yep.
I cannot believe he didn't go to Mars to fight aliens through a secret portal from Area 51. I've always said this every time one of them comes on and goes, "Oh yeah, I've been trained. I can do this and I can do that." Go on then.
Oh yeah.
You can run 40 miles an hour. Go on then. You can jump over a 20-foot wall. Go on then.
I can't today. I don't have my good shoes on.
Just, especially in this day and age, if you're doing a live stream, right, and you're saying, yeah, I've been trained and had chips implanted in my buttocks to make me a super powerful fighting machine who can punch through bricks. Go on then. Do it now. Pick a brick up. Hit it.
This is where human nature runs up against technology, because this is a very specific kind of lying that our grandfathers and their grandfathers used to call bullshitting. Because you'd come home and you'd say, "Oh, Billy's dad says he was a spy," and your mom would say he's lying, and your grandpa would say, "Oh, he's bullshitting." Like the guy Frank Dukes, who claimed that Bloodsport was a fucking documentary. And it was a story of his life. No, it wasn't. He was bullshitting. Though his whole spread in Kung Fu magazine, all his stuff about being a secret agent, it was just bullshit. It was just nonsense. Like most of Steven Seagal's stories, they're not real. They're just bullshit. But
what?
That was from, I know, I'm sorry, breaking your heart. But
You'll be telling me he's an actor next.
no, I definitely will never tell you that. But again, this is all from a past era where you couldn't verify shit. The 80s, you could, kids, if you don't know, in the 80s, you could say anything. No one knew anything. No one ever fucking went anywhere. So you could just, people would believe you. I'm an Australian sea captain. Sure. Okay. Yeah. I don't even know what an Australia is. You're an Australian. I believe you. Tell me about the ocean blue. I fight bears. What's that like? Can I see your scars? No, I don't have any because I heal really fast. Oh, okay. Sure.
Because I'm too fast for them.
Yeah, that's it. I'm too fast. I am a ninja. I'm a super soldier ninja with a chip in my ass. And back then, no one knew any better. And they couldn't Google it. You know, what are they going to do? Go to the phone book and look for ninjas and try and verify your... No. Well, that guy's a ninja. I remember a friend of mine, her sister dated this guy. And this guy, he missed the era of the golden era of bullshit. So, and with like these super soldier guys who called you, because he used to talk about being in Nam, despite the fact that he was not yet born when the Tet Offensive happened. You'd raise this and he'd just kind of brush it off like you weren't even there. And this is a man who missed the golden age of bullshit, back when people didn't know stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's like that when I thought daddy longlegs were the most venomous insect in the world, but their fangs weren't strong enough to pierce human skin. It's one of the first things I checked for when I got the internet in 1998.
Yeah,
it wasn't
it's like
true.
My friend's sister was married to this loser, and his whole thing was babies are born knowing everything and they forget it when they get older. And you know, it was just like the tail end of the goal. Oh, I know. Thankfully, he got deported back to America.
So he could forget all about Canada.
Well, Canada certainly worked hard to forget about him. The only good thing that man ever produced was those two sons, and they're both lovely boys. But yeah, these guys are, the internet just, well, I'd say the internet ruined this shit, but I guess it hasn't. It's just, you have to lie in a different way, or bullshit, and you can't bullshit like you used to. And these super soldier guys you're talking about, they are relics of a bygone era. So really, you should cherish them, Paul.
No. Hey, Brian, since when did we have chickens?
Oh, hey, Paul. Well, you know how I'm back at the gym.
Sure.
Well, that means I need to get my protein intake back up, and not the cost of chicken nowadays. I just thought
you'd raise your own. Right. I see the logic there. But why don't you just try Huel Black Edition?
What's Huel Black Edition?
Huel Black Edition is a nutritionally complete, high-protein vegan meal in a convenient shake.
A whole meal in one shake?
That's right. Each scoop of Huel contains 200 calories. I use 2 scoops per shake. That gives me 27 essential vitamins and minerals, plus 40 grams of lactose and gluten-free, naturally flavoured protein. It's convenient, delicious, and at an average of $2.50 per 400 calories. Inexpensive way to meet your nutritional needs. Huel sent us samples of their cookies and cream flavour, and I love it.
You sold me, my friend. How do I get some Huel?
Go to huel.com/GSG to place your order. That's HUEL.com/GSG. And first-time customers get a free t-shirt and shaker.
Huel.com/GSG. All right, I'm in.
So now what are you going to do with these chickens?
Chase them for cardio, I guess. If it's good enough for Rocky, it's good enough for me.
You know Rocky wasn't real, right?
Let me have this, Paul.
Family Memories from Dennis. The first paranormal story happened a long time ago in 1985 when I was visiting the Philippines for Christmas holidays with my family. It was my first time going back since immigrating to Canada in 1976. Being a Canadian kid, I wasn't accustomed to hot weather, and on a day trip to the city, I passed out while crossing a street. Apparently I was out the whole day sleeping into the evening. Here's where my first ever paranormal experience occurred. I was put into my grandmother's bedroom upstairs to sleep. At some point in the evening, I half awoke to see it was dark with only the light of the moon, and it was still quite warm out. Back home, some of the houses didn't have glass, but only decorative bars instead, so you were somewhat exposed to the elements, and it helped with keeping the house cool. I got up from laying on my stomach and half turned around to look out of the window, which was located just beyond the foot of the bed. To my surprise, a 3-legged cat was walking past the window along the half ledge. It was my first time I'd ever seen an animal missing a limb. As the cat walked by, it stopped and looked right at me, and then continued walking until it had passed out of sight. I was still half asleep when all of a sudden a cool breeze swept the room. I remember it being very soothing. This is where it all got paranormal. Finally, I know, sorry. At that point, I felt a cold hand cup my left shoulder, squeezing and releasing whilst pushing me lightly back down to the pillow. I fell asleep almost instantly and didn't wake up until the morning. I told my family what had happened the night before during breakfast. My grandmother said that I had had a visit from my late grandfather, who had passed away 6 months before I was born in 1975. Being 10 at the time, I found it a little scary and nice at the same time. To this day, it was like it was yesterday, and I remember every moment still so vividly. My grandmother has since passed away. She was like my second mother, and the person I ran to whenever I was in trouble at home. I miss her dearly. My second story involves my now 6-year-old daughter. It's so weird because I became aware of this occurrence in July of this year, which was a month before discovering your great show. One Saturday morning, I was making my bed whilst my daughter Julia was doing cartwheels and my dog Roxy was running back and forth with the zoomies. My daughter stopped doing cartwheels to chase my dog who ran under the bed, and as she was down on the floor trying to coerce Roxy from under it, she got up and said, "That's her. That's how I saw Daddy." I stopped and asked her, "That's her? Who's her? What are you talking about, Julia?" She replied, "That's who I was waving to you in that closet the day I was sick and slept with Mummy on your bed. That's her." She was holding a picture of my grandmother, Prissy, and me, taken at my wedding in 2002. The very same grandmother who had passed away in 2012, and the same grandmother that I so dearly missed from the previous ghost story. I then said a little spooked, "This is Grandma Prissy. So Grandma was just standing in the closet?" She answered back so nonchalantly, "No, Daddy, she was waving at me first, so I waved back." This apparently happened when Julia was only 2 years old, but my wife never told me, or it had slipped her mind. I can't lie and say I wasn't a bit freaked out. I'm still a bit spooked today. Whatever the visit was from my grandma, I'm sure she had good intentions and just wanted to say hello to her great-granddaughter. Grandma hasn't made an appearance since. Or has she? After listening to your show, I thought family members who passed away usually stay around for about 6 months and then go away after saying goodbye their way. This happened 6 years after my grandma had passed. Weird.
So thank you, Dennis. And the first thing we should probably say is that no one really knows anything when it comes to the paranormal. So, hard and fast rules like 6 months, I just don't think are worth even considering, because what you're talking about is someone who would theoretically by that point be beyond the structures of time. If we are to believe that the consciousness survives a point of physical death, I don't necessarily know then that you would have the same way of measuring time, because that is so bound to the physical. So I would say it's entirely possible that your grandmother came to visit, and why not?
Yep, I've heard all kinds of time limits put on things like that, from people saying it can only happen in the first 24 hours to people saying there's no limit and pick a number between them. It's as simple as that, which tells you that nobody's got any idea, really.
Yeah, that's what it boils down to. I always like to say that kind of stuff, and be insistent about it, because no one really knows. And I'm always suspicious of people who say they do. This is one of those areas that people love to kind of claim mastery over, because it's something that not a lot of people talk about. And so, relatively speaking, and so they can kind of pretend to be an expert, but there are no experts in the paranormal.
The chances of a 2-year-old creating a story about an old lady standing in a closet waving at her to then point out who she was waving to 4 years after the event strikes me as an event that actually happened.
Yeah, that's, unless that is something people talked about around them a lot, I can't imagine I mean, again, I don't have kids. I don't have that experience, but it seems like a very specific story for a kid to cook up for no reason.
Well, we've got something similar at the moment in our family, that one of my mum rescues dogs. Ironically, one of them had 3 legs. It was Lucy, beautiful, chocolate Labrador. She looked like a kangaroo, bless her, bounding about. And but Lucy sadly died suddenly. So my mum rescued another couple of dogs called Ted and Bonnie. And she'd had them a couple of years. And last bonfire night, 2021, my mum came home from work to find Bonnie dead at home.
Oh.
And she died peacefully at home. And bless him, Ted was laid next to her, trying to wake her up.
Oh.
But she wouldn't get up. And she was a beautiful little spaniel, one of those that just walked around. She'd always lick you. She was very licky. She was a little sweetheart. And so my niece, Sophia, never really bothered about the dogs, wasn't fussed about them, didn't really want to spend any time with them, was a bit agitated by them, as toddlers can be with dogs.
Sure.
Because as we all know, dogs don't have boundaries. And so anyway, over the last 6 months, she started going on and on and on about Bonnie. Constantly.
Oh.
Like, wanted to know if my mum had had her since she was a puppy, and so my mum explained why she'd not had her as a puppy, that she was rescued, and she found that terribly sad, and she wanted to know where, and she started asking loads of questions about the dog, to the point that she ended up drawing my mum a portrait of all different sizes of Bonnie at different ages of her life. And then on Christmas Day, she wanted to know where Bonnie's ashes were. She wanted to look at Bonnie's ashes, and we're all a bit perplexed because she had no emotional contact with this dog whatsoever. None. Until she died. And now we're thinking, what's all this about?
Yeah, that does raise some questions.
Because she's also one of those kids who, when she goes to people's houses, she'll tell people about the ghosts that live in their houses.
Really?
Mm.
Oh, interesting. And are these things that the people maybe have known before, or is it usually a surprise?
Sometimes it's a bit of both.
Oh, wow.
I mean, the first time she came round to the house we used to live in, she was just stood at the bottom of the stairs for a bit. And I said, "What are you doing?" She says, "Oh, I'm looking at the ghost." And then she just started waving up the stairs. And we'd not talked about ghosts or anything. We weren't talking about anything. In fact, the football was on, I think. We were just talking about family stuff and life. And she was just took herself out of the way and stood at the bottom stairs just looking up it. The light was off. And she just said,
"Wow."
Oh. And I was like, "Ooh." I wasn't like, "Ooh." I was like, "Ooh, right, okay, what does it look like?" And she said it was a little old lady. And there used to be a little old lady that lived in that house.
No shit.
Mm-hmm.
The Sneering Man, from Cate. I was in my early 20s, which was 30 years ago now, and working in the main bus station in Glasgow, Scotland. It was my first reasonably paid job, and I loved it, but I had to work shifts, and the latest finish was 11 p.m., which could have caused a problem as my last bus home was at 11:08, so I was always in a rush to close the information booth dead on time and run to catch my bus, which ironically never left from the bus station. This one night late in January, it was pouring rain in the middle of a long, dark Scottish winter. I shut up my shop, put on my jacket, which was more of a fashion statement than proper winter wear, put up my umbrella, and hurriedly left to catch my bus. If you have ever visited Glasgow, it is a noisy, vibrant city centre, especially at the weekend. But during the week at that time of night and in the rain, it was a ghost town. I never saw one person on my way to the bus, just a few cars. I must have been about 15 feet from turning the next corner to my bus stop when I happened to look down at the ground. There was my shadow. My brain was registering something wasn't right, and in a nanosecond I realized my shadow had 2 heads. Instinctively I turned to my left, and I can still see it to this day, a man's head with a flat cap on, no more than 2 inches from me, with a weird, wide sneer on his face. I still get shivers just thinking about it. His face, hat, everything was all the one tone of light ashy gray. He seemed to emit his own light. Adrenaline kicked in and I immediately took flight. But I also started to turn on my second or third step to face the way I came, thinking if I'm going to be attacked, I need to face this person and fight, but there was no one there. He was gone. Vanished. There were no doorways for someone to hide, no alleyways I could have ran down as I was in the middle of a block, and no noise of footsteps retreating. and there was no time for them to run to the next corner, as I'd only taken 2, maybe 3 steps. I continued to walk quickly, backwards, towards the corner of the street where I needed to turn to catch my bus, trying to wrap my head around what happened. The bus stop was thankfully busy with folks who had just finished their shifts in local bars, restaurants, and so on, and they must have wondered why I come around the corner backwards. I have no idea what that was, but it did give me a great sense of menace, even though I can't explain it. And thank you, Cate. I think that might actually be one of our first stories from Scotland on the show.
Definitely.
And so what do you think? Have you heard anything about sort of ashy, light-emitting ruffians in flat caps?
There's something that rings a bell, but I can't place it, and certainly not in a public place.
Interesting. What's the vague memory you're having? Is that is something like a private home or in a bar or something?
Yeah, in a house, haunted house, seeing a hat-wearing, ashen-faced ghoul.
Well, I wonder what the significance of that is. I mean, I feel like there's, even though I've never been to Scotland, I feel like there's few better places for a ghost story than a rainy Scottish night.
Very much so, yes. Glasgow is a very strange city, one I've visited several times, and it's a beautiful place. But it's also one of those places that if you take the wrong turning or you don't know where you're going at night, you can end up somewhere that feels deeply unwelcoming.
And I assume this is not from just a spiritual perspective.
Not spiritual, physical.
Gotcha. Yes. The Glasgow Kiss was so named for a reason.
Yes. There's many a tourist mistakenly wandered off into the Barrowlands, never to be seen again.
Sounds like New Orleans. Cate, it's truly fascinating. Thank you so much. And it's the proximity of it, I think, that scares the shit out of me. Because this is someone who's right there.
Definitely.
And I very much understand the adrenaline thing, because we had that during Nick's visit here in Montreal, because the apartment that I share is on the 28th floor. And I told Paul about this off air, but during Nick's visit one night, she was in bed, I had my shorts on, and the fire alarm went off. We thought, okay, my one roommate at the time, who's since moved out, he sometimes would leave his incense burning and it would set off the alarm. So I went and checked his room. He wasn't out. He has a friend he stays with most of the time. So then we went to the hallway to check, and no, the elevators were on lockdown. It was an actual fire alarm. So 28 floors, which works out to about 56 flights of stairs. And we just booked ass down those things. And I tell you, man, the adrenaline kicks in. I have never done such great time on stairs as I did that night. And I know it was adrenaline because I didn't feel anything until the next day, when my legs felt like solid blocks of steel, as did my wife's. And so we spent probably the remainder of her time in Montreal largely saying variations on, my legs hurt, I feel old. And it was a very sobering experience, all in all. For what turned out to be a false alarm, too, I might add. I mean, not that it would be better if the building had burned down, Well, if I'm going down these steps, I want the thing to be on fire.
I'm Charlton Heston.
That's right. I did that once. I was years ago at school.
Set fire to a building?
Shh, quiet.
Oh.
No, say something stupid and then have the thing turn out to be real. I was standing at the top of the stairs and it was a lineup, and I remember shouting down, someone better be dead down there for this to be taking this goddamn long. And they weren't dead, but they had fallen down the stairs and they were quite badly hurt. And that has haunted me to this day.
Laurie's stories. It seems like I've always attracted the paranormal. I'm not a medium or a psychic, but there has been a connection with the unliving for as long as I can remember. When I was younger, around 11, I wanted a sister my age so terribly bad. Both of my siblings were nearly a decade older than myself. My mum had given birth to a daughter the year before I was born. She only lived for 17 hours before she passed away. I'd always fantasized that she was alive. When playing school, Kelly was always there. When I'd had a particularly rough day, which was frequent as a young child through my teenage years, I'd ask Kelly to come and sit with me until I fell asleep. During these times, I would feel a slight weight on my bed, and I would hear breathing that wasn't my own. I never questioned the source, and I always felt safe. When I was 16, a more malevolent... Oh, fucking hell, fire. Oh, Jesus Christ.
What's
I can't
is it
remember
giving
how
you
to
trouble?
I can't remember how to pronounce that word. I can't even say it.
Sir, which word? Malevolent.
Malevolent. Fucking hell. Malevolent. My brain just froze. I was like, what is that? Malevolent. When I was 16, I'm more oh, fucking hell.
I'll just pop in malevolent. But no. Malevolent. Da, 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 da.
When I was 16, I'm more fucking hell. Hang on a minute here. Hang on. When I was 16, a more malevolent visitor presented itself.
That was quite it either. Malevolent.
When I was 16, a more malevolent.
Sorry.
See, I said it malevolent. Malevolent. When I was 16, a more malevolent. Okay, now I can't say it at all now. When I was 16, a more
malevolent
visitor presented itself. I was staying at my best friend's house, and we had fallen asleep in the living room. Suddenly, we both woke up. We noticed on the stairs what appeared to be a demon, red, with horns and chains wrapped around him. The chains were likely what had woken us up. Each of us were terrified, as you can imagine. I remember scooting as fast as I could against the wall, putting as much space between myself and that beast. Other than that, the only memory I have is Ozzy Osbourne playing on the radio. To this day, I can't listen to Ozzy or Black Sabbath without having a panic attack. That was my first encounter with something that was evil. I can remember how terrified I was that night, nearly 40 years later. As I became an adult, most of my experiences were benign. An unusual noise that shouldn't be there, a misplaced item found in the strangest of places. In my late 20s with a toddler, my husband worked graveyards. I would often hear the shower start only to find nobody there. Doors would open and close when my husband was at work, and when my daughter was sleeping soundly. One evening when my daughter had climbed into bed with me, as she often did, there was a bright light on the wall. It stayed for several seconds, then streaked across the room. I thought I was seeing things, until my daughter asked, "Did you see that, Mummy?" Needless to say, I slept little that night. There were times when a more heavy presence seemed to haunt me in that house. I'd be certain that there'd be an intruder, and I'd retrieve our gun from the safe. At 27, I had a late-term miscarriage, and my 4-year-old daughter had been so excited to be a big sister. At that young age, she couldn't understand what had happened, and at times had asked me why I didn't want Tyler. This broke me every time. It was about a year afterwards that my daughter made the comment that Tyler would visit her, and he'd sit in the chair that was in her room. She described a very young boy with blonde hair and brown eyes who would tell her everything was all right. If Tyler were to be born, he would have probably looked just like that. My daughter disclosed as an adult that she would be visited by this child until she was 12 and moved from that house. She said she was never scared, but instead felt comforted by his presence, much like I would be when it seemed that my sister would visit me. Things were calm for several years until I married my second husband. I would often think he had come home early from work, as I would hear the back door shut and heavy boots go into the bathroom. I would call out to him, and when there was no answer, I would get up to go to find him. There, of course, was never anyone there. Sometimes I'd hear the shower only for it to be empty when I checked. It was around this time that small things would be misplaced only to be in the laundry room or the spare room. My husband felt sure that I had moved it myself, at times annoyed that I kept leaving things in weird places. I never felt completely threatened, but it was definitely uncomfortable with what was happening. Similar events followed me for years regardless of where I lived. I even experienced a pet haunting. My cat of 16 passed away from old age in my arms. She had been my constant companion and been through so much with me. After she died, I would hear her cat claws on the hardwood floor outside my bedroom, I would hear her signature meow as she would jump on the bed, and I would even feel her weight on my chest at times. In my late 40s, I moved into an old Victorian house that had been built in the early 1880s. It was incredible. I lived with 4 other people and became close friends with one of my roommates. We'd tell ghost stories, and she disclosed that there had been unexplainable things that had happened in that house. There were many times I would think I heard something, and I would find my cat staring at a dark space with his tail fluffed out. There were voices in parts of the house where there were no people. 2 instances made a huge impact on me. The first was when I was awoken by the blaring of the smoke alarm. My roommate and I raced into the hall and searched the entire house for smoke or worse, a fire. There was no evidence of either. My roommate assured me she had changed all of the batteries in each of the smoke detectors. Confident there was no danger and it was a fluke, we both went back to bed. I had just fallen back to sleep when the upstairs alarm went off, and we followed the same steps as before. Again, after falling asleep, the downstairs alarm went off. We had barely reset that one, and the second floor alarm blared for a second time. In the same house several months later, I was awakened by a voice in my ear. "Wake up," it said. Then the breaking of glass happened, which really woke me up. My roommate met me in the hall, both of us asking the other, "What the hell was that?" Together, we walked the house, and it wasn't until we came up the main stairs that we saw what had broken. Well, shattered really. There was a large mirror on the middle landing that had fallen, and shards of glass were everywhere. The interesting thing was that it shouldn't have fallen. All of the brackets holding it up were still in place, making it impossible for the mirror to fall like it had. Later, I listened to my sleep app recording and heard a voice saying, "Wake up." There was also a scream at the exact same time as the glass breaking. It wasn't long after that we moved into another place together. I had hoped that the activity around me would have stopped, but that was wishful thinking. There were all the usual unexplained noises and feelings of being watched. At least twice I was startled awake to see a faceless figure at the end of my bed, wearing a hat and definitely male. It stayed for a second and then vanished. Another time, in my living room, I had dropped a metal pet tag, and even though I immediately searched everywhere for it, I couldn't find it anywhere. A month later, when moving my bedroom furniture, I found the tag under my bed. The last and most terrifying event to happen at that house started whilst I was in bed. My bed vibrated several times and I couldn't find a cause. It wasn't my phone, and there was nothing under my bed. Then there was a tapping on my window, but even as it happened while I looked outside, there was no one there. I'd had enough, so I grabbed a blanket and went out to the living room. I noticed my cat was acting strangely too. It seemed like something was playing with me, and a knocking came from the pantry, then the living room window, then from under the kitchen sink. The knocking was cycling quickly until it seemed like it was happening all at once. I was terrified. I got my shoes on my feet and grabbed my keys and purse and bolted, looking behind me in case whatever it was following me. I begged my ex to let me sleep on his couch. That was the last event that happened in that house, but as you would expect, I never felt comfortable there again. I always like a pet ghost.
Anything that sort of reminds me that, when Chewie and Bodhi have to go, that they will still be around. That makes me pretty happy.
I'm always intrigued with people who essentially, we often talk about people living in haunted houses, but often, as that passage proves, you can be a haunted person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was interesting, the part of the story where she saw the malevolent entity. Sorry, I'm showing off there.
The malevolent.
There we go.
See, I can say malevolent now.
Oh,
malevolent.
no.
Malevolent. Malevolent.
There's an extra L keeps working its way in there.
Malevolent.
Oh, there is that extra L.
Malevolent.
My sister always tells me she likes it when you mispronounce words. She's going to love this episode.
Malevolent.
Da, 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 da. Anyways.
Malevolent.
Da, 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 da. But the fact, I thought it was interesting that, it sort of appeared demonic and they were listening to sort of heavy metal music at the time. And I think that goes a long way towards this notion that things can choose how they present themselves.
Yep.
And that the way we can perceive things is sometimes influenced by our environment. Because I don't think heavy metal music and, Ozzy Osbourne in particular is any more satanic than this can of Diet Pepsi by my hand here. But, it can be, especially at the time, it can be menacing music. And if that thing decides to use that imagery, then it can be a very potent mix. I remember, and I'm sure I've told the story on the show before, but I know a fellow who's very religious. He's Christian. I think he's Pentecostal Christian. And a friend of his went on a mission to Africa. And this guy, his whole thing was demons. He studied demons, I guess demonology. And so he had read all these texts about demons, and I have no idea. I assume it's in the teacher's edition of the Bible or something. But one of the things he claims to have seen in Africa is legitimately a demon. A full forked tail, or not forked tail, what do you call it? They have a sick kind of tail, like a spade tail or whatever. I can't think of the fucking name. A malevolent tail, but
fuck off.
But yeah, anyway, like a textbook demon this guy saw, and he was terrified of it. And I sort of was, I was struck by it because I thought, it's fascinating that you would see this thing the way you had been instructed to see it. He knew everything about demons there was to know, both in terms of their arcana and their appearance, and so that's how I believe that's how it chose to present it to him. I don't actually think that's how they look.
Well, plus it would depend on which country in Africa he was in, because if certain countries they wouldn't necessarily have the Christian idea of a demon, they'd have a jinn, wouldn't they?
Yeah, that's yeah. There's a bunch of reasons why it's unlikely to actually be a demon, as he sees it or as he believes him. But I think whatever he saw, that's how he interpreted it. And I think our surroundings go a long way towards sort of dictating how we take these things in. Yeah.
Well, some people have said that's why people are now more comfortable talking about things like shadow people or the Hat Man, because they think that once it's out there, they realize it has an effect on people, and that's how it decides to appeal to people or to appear even.
Oh, really? Like the telling of the story is what allows it to spread?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a terrifying thought. Kind of like, was it Sinister? Was a little bit like that horror movie. Oh, that's a fascinating thought. One other thing I wanted to mention, this kind of reminded me of something that happened, and I don't think I've told you about this yet, about the voices that woke me up the other night.
Oh.
So this was when Nick was still here, and I was having a particularly unpleasant dream, and then I woke up and I had this very particular feeling. I've only ever had this feeling once before when I woke up, and it was about 5 years ago when I went over to Vancouver and I was staying in this Fleabag motel.
Mm.
And when I went to bed, a couple was arguing in the next room and she was giving him real shit.
Mm.
And then I woke up about an hour later and the tenor of the conversation had changed. Now he was giving her shit and she sounded pained. I actually remember her saying something to the effect of, as I was waking up, that like, you're hurting me. And it was this really deep-seated, unpleasant feeling. And shortly after that, the cops turned up and they kind of, I think they took him away is how it ended. But anyway, so the other night I was laying in bed and I woke up and I had that same feeling sitting in my chest. And that's when I realized I was hearing what I assume was upstairs. And now, to be clear, the ceiling is concrete. So in order to be heard, you have to be making some real noise. I heard a man and a woman, younger, screaming at each other. And she was crying and she sounded really upset. And his voice was much more aggressive. And they were and I could almost make out what they were saying, but not quite. But again, I normally never hear anything from upstairs. If they drop something particularly heavy, I might hear them, but that's it. And so I'm laying in bed and again, she's sobbing and he's just very angry. And she sounded kind of, like in discomfort. And I thought, okay, well this, I got to do something because I can't just sit here and listen to this. So I started to get up and then I heard stomping and then I heard what sounded like two doors slamming. And the way these apartments are structured, I think what I heard was the bedroom door slamming and then the main door slamming. And she was still crying. I thought, okay, so he's gone, but I should, So what I did is I went downstairs to security because I thought, I don't know the situation. It's going to be super weird if I turn up, but everyone's pretty familiar with the guys at the front desk. So I went down and said something to the guy, and he came up with me. And on the way up, he said, there's a couple who's living on the floor above you. We've had real problems with him, especially with a guy. He's not on the lease, but he stays over a lot. And he's been asking really sketchy questions about security protocols, how the key cards work and things like this, where the video blind spots are. Yeah, not great, not encouraging questions.
If I'm going to murder somebody in this apartment block, how can I do it?
Yeah, what would be the best way to accomplish this? Where do the cameras not see? Just for no reason.
Is it easy to climb up the wall?
Yeah. So anyways, we got to the 29th floor. The guy said, it's better if you don't come. You go back. Thank you for alerting me. And so I was okay. But when he got off the elevator, he went in the wrong direction. To go to the apartments above my apartment, you go left. He went right. So I thought, well, okay, fine. Got into bed. Didn't hear it anymore. Fell asleep. The next morning I went down and asked at the front desk. And at the time, the fellow working at the time was someone I know a little bit better. And I asked him, I said, how did things end up last night? And he said, he went and dealt with it. But he said, it wasn't the people above you. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, that couple that we were talking about, he said, they live on the other side of the floor. I said, well, that doesn't make sense because the fight was above me. I said, and he said, no, he said, the people above you, he said, it's two young girls. No one on either side of them heard a fight. And it was just them there last night. They didn't have any company. So I somehow heard an argument happening in an apartment that is not only a floor above me, but is on the opposite side of the building through several other apartments and 3 elevator shafts. I have no idea how.
Or you heard a situation in your apartment that had happened in the past.
No, I'm the first resident in this room.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's a new build. Yeah, I know because when I moved in, my first roommate, the guy, do you have a weapon guy? He was the first person to live here, and when he moved in, everything was brand new. Everything was just yuck, and so he was the first person to live in his room. Then I moved into this room, and I was the first person in here. So, but somehow it sounds like it was that couple. They were having a fight, but that I could hear them doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There is literally no physical way. I mean, I shouldn't say no physical way because it happened, but somehow I heard a fight that was happening way the fuck far away from me that I should not have been able to hear. Because again, I can never hear people above me.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, sir. Makes 0 sense. Welcome to my life. That's going to be the title of my autobiography. Makes 0 sense. The Brown Storm
Unless you
story.
were supposed to hear it.
Maybe. Who knows? I mean, the only thing that occurred to me is, and who fucking knows, right? But when I used to do the sensory deprivation tanks, I would sometimes, now again, the whole point of those things is no sound. No sound, no light. You're just in the water, totally in the dark and in the silence, and which I quite like. But there were times where I could hear the guy at the front desk talking to people who would come in, which again should not be possible given the way those rooms are structured. So I don't know. I mean, maybe you stick me in the dark and suddenly I'm superhuman. I don't know, in a very lame way, but I don't know. It baffles me. And again, normally I don't care because whatever you happen to, I expect weird stuff to happen in a sensory deprivation chamber, but it's another thing entirely when you're sleeping in your apartment and it wakes, it's again disturbing enough to wake you up out of a dead sleep at 3:30 in the morning. On the road from Kerry. I am binging old Ghost Story Guys episodes while I drive, having just finished The Curious Case of Bumblebuzz, episode 70. Oh man, that's a blast from the past. Well, at around 1 a.m. while driving south on I-81 in Pennsylvania, I experienced several things that in isolation would not be alarming at all. It's the fact that all of these things happened at once that makes me think it could be paranormal. I was listening to Pennies from Heaven or thereabouts. I also remember that episode. I think that's 69. I was listening to Pennies from Heaven or thereabouts while driving my truck. I have a Bluetooth headset and have the episodes playing on my phone, so everything is hands-free. In a message I've sent to you before, I mentioned that I've never really experienced anything paranormal, but I have felt that this stretch of American highway to be particularly creepy. I have since learned that there is a haunted location in general proximity to where I was driving, that haunting being in Pittston, Pennsylvania. So, while driving, my satellite radio turned on. That in and of itself is not a big deal because it happens once in a while, because Volvo trucks are notorious for having electrical systems that go awry out of nowhere. A couple minutes later, my CB radio came on. This radio runs off of the truck's batteries, so if there's an electrical glitch, it would make sense that the CB radio would be affected. However, turning on the CB requires physically turning a knob that allows electricity to flow through its circuitry. Within a few seconds, the windshield wipers, which had been on, started glitching. The reception for the satellite radio is digital, so it's either a signal coming through or not. This time, there was a typical broadcast for the station, but a substantial amount of white noise. The CB radio had its normal amount of white noise. I then experienced glitches with the playback of your episode. This is a common occurrence for me when I have data connections issues. The last thing I started noticing, and it's the thing that really freaked me out, is that I was seeing dead deer laying at the side of the road. This is not uncommon in Pennsylvania, but the frequency of the animal carcasses was alarming. Now, I'm not talking about deer piled up all over the place. On I-81, whenever I have driven this particular stretch of highway, it's common to see a dead deer or two at 5 or 10 mile increments, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, until reaching I-80 around Drums, Pennsylvania. I was seeing at least one dead deer every mile or so, all of them off the road either to the left or right. I was about to reach I-80 and be away from whatever it was that I was experiencing, and I really felt like I was driving through something versus something happening to me in the truck. The headlights then started acting weird, dimming and then coming back to normal brightness. I was within 7 miles of I-80 when a deer came within view. I was coming around a curve going downhill weighing 76,000 pounds, so I wasn't going to be able to stop. Thankfully, I had the left lane clear to steer away from the deer. Doubly thankfully, the deer didn't do what they sometimes do, which is jump back into the path of the oncoming vehicle. I've had many close calls with deer, so this is not anything weird. Any one of these things happening on its own, and I wouldn't really give it much thought. But putting them all together at night, and happening on a single stretch of highway that's already creepy on its own, it was death by 1,000 cuts. I'm open to the idea that my imagination got a hold of me while driving. I'm open to the idea that this part of Pennsylvania is just haunted as fuck. I'm open to the idea that both of these things met in confluence while I listened to a podcast about ghostly shit. The only thing I am not open to is the idea that my truck is now possessed and needs to be exorcised. Miss me with that hot garbage. I feel a safe place in sharing this experience with you. I won't be sharing it with any coworkers nor my company. I don't dare try reporting it to my company because I have no idea what the camera for the truck actually recorded. I would be taken out of service in a heartbeat if I were to talk about seeing some things that the camera shows didn't happen. So, this experience will have its existence remain in my mind and with the Ghost Story guys. So, Kerry, thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's too many electrical failures to be a coincidence.
Yeah.
But the dead deer, that is weird. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Pennsylvania is a Bigfoot hotspot.
Oh, okay. So you think Bigfoot was just out there murking deer?
I don't know. I've no idea. It's very strange. Very strange. But when she said she said where she was, I knew exactly what she's talking about. It's one of the most controversial alleged hauntings of the 20th century.
Really? So what is it?
The Smurl case with our good friends Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Oh, for God's sakes.
It's one of those where they claimed that a demon was living in their house and they'd been terrorized for a decade.
Sure.
They fetched the Warrens in, claimed they tried to sort it out. Then it hit the headlines because, strangely, somebody leaked it to the press. Can't think who that was. And
I'm shocked.
And then they came out and said, right, well, we're sick to death of talking about this. Only to then, 3 months later, release a book all about it.
Shocked. Jesus Christ, those people.
They moved out, I think, towards the end of the 80s. The person who followed them in said, nothing. Absolutely nothing here. Nothing happens. I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. I don't smell anything. I don't. So make of that what you will. It's more notorious than famous, shall we say.
Oh, I see. And Kerry, funny you mentioned Bumblebuzz. I was actually contacted recently by the listener who submitted that story in the first place. And I'm going to be doing a follow-up interview with her and her son who had the experience, which we'll be showcasing on a later show. So, yeah, keep an eye out for that. Man, that was episode 70. That had to have been, 2018, 2019, something like that? It's a whole other lifetime ago, Paul.
In the before times.
In a lot of ways, the before times, yeah. Holy shit.
before we even had a selection of masks to choose from. Our final tale is also from Kerry. The truck stop. In a previous email, I shared a rather weird experience and stated that I have never had experiences like that in the past. I didn't realise it at the time, but a few months ago I may have had experienced something truly spooky. I will have to just tell you what happened for it to make sense why I write may and why I am just discovering it months later. So while driving my semi-truck with a load back to Massachusetts, I stopped at the Petro truck stop along I-81 in Pennsylvania. It was quite late at night, probably midnight. I can't provide specifics on a date because running load after load to various parts of the country, days sometimes bleed together, and keeping track of what happens on what date becomes difficult. What I can say is that this truck stop stood out in my mind because there were ample truck parking spots open, which can sometimes be hard to find in the late hours, especially at the major truck stop chains. I parked my truck and went into the store to buy food. I came back to my truck and went to sleep. In the morning, I went into the store and got myself some coffee, then continued on my way driving. It was not until weeks later that this night at the Petro truck stop proved to be eerie. I have since tried to find that truck stop, and I am completely unable to find the place where I parked on that night. For the sake of clarification, as most truck drivers are, I'm quite good at finding locations of places that have truck parking. There are 2 Petro truck stops on I-81 in Pennsylvania. I've been to both since that night, and neither of them looks like the place where I parked. I have been to the other truck stops near both of those Petro truck stops, and none of them fits the layout of where I parked that night either. So this is a physical description of the place where I parked. There is a fueling island adjacent to the truck stop store. Facing away from the street at the fueling island, the store is on the right. To the front is a berm that rises to a truck parking area. Leading from the store is a walkway and stairs that proceed up the berm. Between the berm and the store, the lot is paved and the pavement continues around to the right of the berm, with the truck parking looking down on the rest of the truck stop. There is space for roughly 200 trucks in the truck parking area. Between the stairs that proceed up the berm, there are concreted areas that look like stairs, but they are blocked off and have signs indicating you to use the stairs. There is a pilot truck stop near one of these Petro truck stops that is remarkably similar to this description, but there are some details that are not the same. Noticing details that others might miss is an essential key to be a successful driver, so keep that in mind. I have exhausted my personal resources in trying to find this place where I parked that night, and have thus far been unsuccessful. This would be the first time that I have failed to relocate a place where I have been with my truck. So, did my memory fail me, which is the easy response, or have I experienced something of a supernatural event? I suspect something strange has taken place, but I am not nailing myself down on any stance.
That kind of mystery is one of my favorite things about what we do, man. I love this idea that there are places out there that, they exist only for a brief moment. When I was driving around at night a lot, I think I was just hoping that one day I'd blunder into something like that.
Yeah. There was one on Jim Harold's Campfire last year, and he always does a best of at the end of the year, and there was a woman who rang up saying her car had broke down, and she could see a garage down the hill. So she went to the garage and said it felt a bit strange, and she ended up getting towed back to where she could park her car, and then the guy dropped her off at home, and she said, "Oh, how much do you want?" And he said, $20, and she was like, that's a bit cheap. Even in the 80s, this story had happened in the 80s, and she said it was just ridiculously cheap. So anyway, she got the car sorted, and they decided to come out to give him something else, give him a bit extra to say thanks for all his help. And They got to the truck stop and the garage. It was all boarded up.
I love stuff like that. I think on Road Tripping the Great Beyond, episode 79 or something, we had some stories like that. I think one of the things that appeals to me about the paranormal and doing this show, is I'm continually presented with these little hints that the world is much different than it appears to be. It's much more complex and strange than it appears to be. And stories like that really drive it home.
Yeah, I think because on face value, Kelly's story isn't remarkable unless you look at it properly and you think, well, what's so strange about a truck stop? But when you realise that obviously she's a very experienced driver, she knows that route like the back of her hand, no doubt.
Yeah.
To be unable to find something and have that minutiae of detail to talk about the berm and the concreted areas and the signs telling you not to walk up those areas. These are little things that, if you were telling a tall tale, stuff like that gets glossed over. It's never mentioned. Those finite details. And it's those that make you think, this is a bit odd.
Fascinating stuff. And Kerry, if there is any further developments, please let us know. If you should find this place again, or if any other high strangeness happens out there on the road. Because, it's folks like that who, they're out there in the night. They're the ones who see these things. They're the ones who hear these things. And again, ever since having to sell my car, I haven't been out there as much, and I do miss it. There are times where I miss it. I mean, my back doesn't miss being in the car all the time. And, neither does my waistline. But at the same time, I miss just cruising around out there and never knowing what exactly it is you're going to run across.
And it'd be nice to know if Kerry knows anything about truckers and hellhounds, because I've only just discovered that whole realm of legend in North America.
Do tell, I don't know this.
Well, on my recent episode with Kevin Lee Nelson, he's doing a book about hellhound legends from across the Americas.
Right.
And he discovered that there's a whole range of trucker lore in regards to seeing a hellhound when you're driving.
Really?
Which I didn't know anything about at all.
No, that's a new one on me too.
And apparently it's an ominous sign of something bad.
Right.
So if you see one, you should park up.
Oh, interesting. Not run like you ordinarily would if you saw something like that.
It's basically a warning. If you ignore it,
right.
something bad will happen. If you heed it, you'll be fine. And there's stories like this from all over the place. People seeing them in parking lots on certain stretches of road. And I didn't know they got anything about it. And Kevin was saying there's dozens of them. Yeah,
that's a new one on me too. But yeah, if anyone out there has had that experience or have heard these stories, write and let us know. GhostStoryGuys@gmail.com.
Apparently there's a film about it starring Patrick Swayze.
Oh, Black Dog.
Yes.
Okay. I did not realize that is what Black Dog referred to, because I'm aware of it. I have not seen it. That was from the late 90s with Meatloaf as the villain.
Makes sense.
Okay. Well, I mean, if ever there was a villain, Black Dog. I hadn't thought about that movie in a long time. So we're going to take a quick break and come right back with our Ghost Force shoutouts. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123, or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you, and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. Thanks always to Luke, Anthony, Sarah, Joseph, and everyone else who's part of the Ghost Story Guys family. Don't forget to check out Luke's podcast, Luke Lore, available everywhere fine podcasts live. Joseph's show is The Cardinal Rule. It's about Arizona Cardinals football, and you can find that on YouTube, Spotify, or by going to azsportsunderground.com. And of course, I also co-host the show Weird Together with Joseph. That is a monthly YouTube live stream about the latest and greatest in independent horror films, although that will soon be available as a podcast as well. But most importantly, thanks to you, my friend and co-host, the inimitable, the one and only, Paul Bestel, the paranormal Johnny Carson himself, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up on M&M?
Okie dokie. So, right now, as I've touched on a couple of stories we've mentioned, I've got Kevin Lee Nelson, which is proving to be an incredibly popular episode, talking about haunted hotels and hellhounds. Kevin has a love of booking himself into the most haunted hotels across America, which is a marvelous thing. And so it was really nice because I've spoken to Kevin a couple of times in conjunction with Chad Lewis, but it was nice to have a conversation with Kevin himself because he's a deeply interesting man with a library that makes mine look like a beginner's.
Oh, wow. That is saying something.
Yeah, so he reckons he's got over 3,000 books at least.
Holy shit.
So that's going some. And so that's a good one. I've also got the return of Denver Michaels, cryptozoologist and author, who sold his home and is currently traveling around America in an RV, visiting every strange and wonderful location in the country.
I love the shit out of that. I love people who do that kind of stuff. I don't know if I have the stones, but I love it.
Yeah, so we're talking about some of the places he's been and what he's up to and where he's been visiting, so that's quite good. And then I'm going to be rounding out the month out with a visit with the marvellous Brett Manning.
Fabulous. And where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media platforms. Just look for Mystery Monsters and Mysteries and Monsters, and across all podcast hosts.
Brilliant. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Largely the Truth. You can find my interview podcast, Largely the Truth with Brennan Storr. That's archived pretty much everywhere fine podcasts live. As I mentioned, I also co-host the monthly YouTube live stream Weird Together with Joseph Camo from In Search of Ghosts and The Cardinal Rule. And that will soon be available as a podcast on its own. Also, we have spun off Book of the Dead and Transmissions from the Void into their own streams as well. So you'll be able to find them in the Ghost Story Guys feed, but if you want to just find the stories, subscribe to Transmissions from the Void, and you will also get those episodes there. Also, and I guess this is as good a time to mention this as any, of course, Strange Little Place 2.0 is out now. You can buy signed copies at ghoststoryguys.bigcartel.com. And people have been asking me when the audiobook will be coming out. And what I decided to do is I did not like the idea of selling the audiobook again, because there are so many people who bought the audiobook. And while this version of the book is better, and the production of the audiobook would have been much better, it didn't feel right. I didn't like it. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to record the audio version of Strange 2.0, and it will be released as a limited series podcast, which will be available via the Ghost Story Guys RSS feed, and then will be available on a separate feed just called A Strange Little Place. So it'll be free for everyone. It'll be ad-supported, of course. And so you'll be able to listen to that as a podcast, probably starting in February. As we said at the top of the show, you can go to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys to join the team. And that gets you access to tons of bonus shows, episodes of Host Adventures, Book of the Dead, me and Paul, all kinds of stuff that is only available to subscribers of the Ghost Story Guys. And again, that starts at $5 a month. $1 a month gets you an ad-free feed. $5 a month gets you all the bonus stuff. And again, you can get all of that at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. I know there are some people out there who like using podcatchers like Spotify, and Spotify does not allow for private RSS links that, for example, that Patreon uses. And so I am looking at options to allow you to subscribe via via Spotify. That has become an option. And while you won't have access to everything that a patron would get, it would get you access to the bonus shows. So that is something that I'm working on putting in place. I just haven't finalized yet. But I know for those of you who use Spotify, which is a significant number of our listeners, that will hopefully become an option in the next month. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, if you support the show at $20 and up, that makes you a member of a very elite club. That makes you a member of Ghost Force. That's right. Patrons who support the show at $20 and up get thanked here every other episode in this segment. This time around, the members of Ghost Force are
Ethan Saragon,
Amy Chamberlain,
Carrie Lambertus,
Cheryl Baker,
Crazy Mom,
Generic Bob,
Hannah Brown,
Hannah Siemens,
Hilary de Saussure,
Jade Moores,
Jason R. Slaughter,
Jennifer Mullen,
Jennifer Shackle,
Joseph Camo,
Julia, Eva, Bacon,
Kimberly Hansen,
Maddie Leatherman,
Mara Noriega,
Mark Semler,
Peter Guns 08.5,
Rebecca Brink,
Rhonda Sheen,
Robin Tien.
You are the few. You are the spooky. You are Ghost Force. For real, guys, thank you so much. We are bowled over by your generosity, and we appreciate the hell out of everyone in Ghost Force. Thank you so much. And again, if you want to join that team, hear your name as part of that exalted role, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. All right. If you want to pick up any Ghost Story Guys merch, head to our website at ghoststoryguys.com. Very soon, you'll be able to directly buy stuff there. And I'm very excited for that. It's an all new site coming. It's going to be a little bit different. We're not going to have the blog available as easily, which archives our appearances, but you will have everything from us in one place, and we'll figure out the blog stuff somehow. But again, for now, just head to ghoststoryguys.com and either follow the links to our TeePublic and Redbubble stores, or depending on when you're hearing this, you'll be able to order your merch right from there. Again, that's ghoststoryguys.com for all your merch needs. Shout out to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts, of course, is a project of film journalist and composer Jerry Smith. You can find Jerry's music streaming everywhere, or by going to nightharvestrecordings.com. And if you'd like to hire Jerry for your project, shoot them an email at rainydaysforghosts@gmail.com. Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursov of Podzontommusic. Find more from him at nightharvestrecordings.com or by searching for Podzontommusic wherever you stream your tunes. And our story's theme is The Future Belongs to Them Now by Hexxagram. Find more from them by searching for Hexxagram wherever you get your music. Again, that's Hexxagram with 2 X's, not 3. And I guess that's going to do it.
Well, we'll be back in a couple of weeks. But until then,
into the darkness we go. And I was watching that Clinton Baptiste clip, so I can just hear you kind of going, fuck. And I'm like, okay, I better pause this.
Here's the real Mr. Skin.
Again, website. That's just keeps coming back. It's just locked in now, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. Ouch. What was that?
That was my knee.
Holy shit.
It's all right. Get used to it. Okay.
Yes. Well, I guess we all know why. New year, same old smut, just like Paul said.
Am I a mystery or a monster? Who knows?
I like to think we're both a little bit of each, Paul.
I was a monster when I was woken up at 7 a.m. on New Year's Day by Julie to tell me that there'd been a power cut, which A, I didn't fucking know about because I was asleep, and B, would have been sorted by the time I woke up. And I got really annoyed. She's like, why are you getting angry? I said, you've woke me up to tell me about something I didn't know had happened and won't know have happened until I'd woken up when you told me.
And it won't affect anything.
I just thought I'd tell you. What? It's 7 a.m. Why the fuck do I need to know there's been a power cut at 7 a.m.?
What?
What the fuck are you talking about? What, you think you can draw money out of your cable box? That was a God's honest email we got.